I was explaining the need to ensure that we connect these young individuals who are high profile, considered some of the highest violent offenders in DC to our resources and jobs. That's critically as important. We had a meeting with them a few weeks ago in which they gave presentations about a business opportunity they wanted to do that was around eliminating rats in Washington, D.C. As a city, we should absolutely support that. They have a fine business model, a plan that these young men have come up with that we should be supporting, not just for jobs, but also entrepreneurship opportunities. And we do have a serious rat problem in D.C., but that's another topic. Sunday morning, I left the hospital around 5:30 a.m. for a young man who was shot. He was 18 years old. This was his second time being shot. He got shot when he was 14, then again 18. And we're seeing, I know the numbers reflect that, you said that juvenile crimes are not going in the right direction, but there are a number of juveniles that's involved in and around schools and school-aged children. So we got to hop on that. And finally, we're seeing an increased number of ambulatory services needed. As the chief mentioned, somebody with these switches and automatic weapons is leaving several victims on the ground, and it's a delayed time in getting ambulances there to the location to get the individuals up into emergency care, was leading to more fatalities. And so I know we are paying for 2 ambulatory services, not sure how they're coordinating, but that's a big issue when I arrive at crime scenes, getting these individuals care with so many people are getting shot in the district. So I will digress there and look for some feedback from these comments and questions. Thank you.
In response?
Councilmember, I'll sort of to start. First of all, we'll make sure today we get you the budget breakdown of all the allocations for last year and this year, as well as the expenditures that you mentioned. In regarding Safe Passage, we have talked about evolving that program, which we have expanded greatly over the past 2 years, expanding it to also include a integration of being outside and inside the schools. We do have a presence inside some schools that Director Hunter mentioned, but that is an area that we want to further evolve the program. It will require, between now and putting it into the budget, really close collaboration with school leaders who have to be very comfortable knowing who's in their school and what their role is, and that is something I think we can do. But there's some delicacy, and it will take the ability to really map out what that model looks like so it's effective. On the EMS question, I'm going to, after this meeting, just look into some of the EMS response times, in particular in areas that we have multiple victims. You're right, we have for many years now had supplementary ambulance service so that we can supplement what FEF EMS is able to do with AMR, and I'll sort of look at the response times, and I'll have Director Hunter talk about pathways.
Thank you, got that. Yeah, so wanted to Councilmember, to your comment about connecting the pathway ambassadors and various program participants to opportunities. There is one notable one I wanted to provide. Through the mayor's expansion of the seasonal leave opportunities, we targeted 50 young men, 40 of which were considered people of promise that are being onboarded now, that are training as we speak, and with life skills and other job training, and they're scheduled to start within the next 2 weeks. And these are actually term employment with benefits. So we're really proud of that, and I think that speaks to your point about providing those sort of opportunities for those participants. And we want to do more of that. Also, we have, of course, our subsidized employment, but also we're connecting Pathways participants to vocational training and other support services as they seek to better themselves in their communities.
Thank you. Councilmember Allen?
Thanks. I appreciate it. I know we're right at 11, so I'll try to be fairly brief, because I assume we got more questions as well. Let me just briefly touch on the RCCA, the Revised Criminal Code, and then I have 1 or 2 questions. I appreciate your comments, Ms. Mayor. Also, to the partners on the table, because it has been a deeply collaborative process. For anybody who has not been paying very close attention to the RCCA, we're talking about updating DC's criminal code for the first time in 120 years. It was written in 1901 and imposed on us by Congress. It's outdated, it's contradictory, it's a mess, and after a 16-year-long process, we now have a revised criminal code in front of us. It is the representation of a lot of compromise, collaboration, stakeholders that normally are adversarial, as it is natural in the criminal justice space, that all came to the table together to work on moving a package forward, and it represents that. I will note, just because, Kevin, as you were talking about the issue that, Ms. Mayor, you highlighted around those public nuisance issues, working with MPD, and thanks, Chief, with your team, we have a solution for those that'll be a part of what gets moved tomorrow. That addresses those concerns. So I believe, again, that spirit of collaboration, working together here to get a package that is going to move forward. In terms of the other real meat of what the update was, I really appreciate the three of you being here. One of the things that you've heard me talk about a lot is that our solutions have got to be both and, not either or. And I think you all sitting here together really represents and illustrates the both and. So I'm grateful for that. And Chief, really appreciate you walking through the stats as well. And you and I talk about this all the time. The stats tell a story, but on one hand, we always say it with a caveat, because if a robbery just happened to you or a carjacking happened on your block, crime just went up. And so we recognize that. I think the way you illustrated the difference between the first half of the year and the second half of the year, in particular around robberies, and we talked about this at the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, but I think it could be beneficial for everybody here as well, around the strategic approaches taken. I think which also lays out in the gun recoveries, 50, almost a doubling of the guns being recovered. I want to ask if you could talk a little about your perspective of the partnership with USAO, MPD strategies, courts, et cetera, around being able to drive that change that we've seen reflected now in the number, especially the first half versus second half when it comes to robberies.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember. Just as an acknowledgement, you know, I think last night we got on the phone about 11:30, 11:40, and before that I was in a different time zone. It was probably 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. So I certainly have an appreciation for the spirit of collaboration to try to really work on the issues that we still differ on. Again, I think reasonable people can disagree on various things. With respect to what we've done in terms of our strategy, we are making a more intentional use and a more focused use of our collaboration with our federal partners on various cases. For example, I'll just use this to highlight one of the things that we did. So as you think differently about how you fight crime, you see a bad guy, and this bad guy who's a felon who shouldn't be in possession of a firearm. However, he's going to Virginia and he's on camera practicing at the range. He's still a felon in possession of a firearm. So we've been able to work with our federal partners to bring charges strategically in cases like that, where people, felon in possession, are, you know, those cases are essentially going over to federal court and people are being held accountable in that space. Same thing with like robbery, for example, and some of the other crimes that we see where people are using handguns, coupled with the commission or coupled with the distribution of narcotics. Enhanced penalties in those spaces when we charge in different venues. So the collaboration with our federal partners is really starting to pay dividends. And as we focus on that, again, I think between June and October, when we generally see the things going through the roof, we've seen dramatic decreases in that space, and we want to continue doing that through the year. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, just one other, I know his colleagues have questions. So
Quickly.
Question. Director Hunter, I know you've been pulling double duty as head of DPR and the One's office, so just a quick public appreciation for your leadership stepping in there, and that's, I know, been a challenge here. We've got another Pathways cohort about to graduate next week, I believe, which I think this may be our 11th class.
The fourth. The 11th cohort, forgive me.
11th cohort, yeah.
That's right.
And just, again, I think you've done an incredible job of stepping in. Are there any updates you can share about the search for the next director for the One's office and continuing the good work taking place there?
Well, that's for me to answer.
Or to the mayor.
And we, as noticed earlier today, I will begin making appointments in some offices where we have vacancies. And so we're working through that process. As I mentioned, we are accepting applications for leadership, policy prevention, policy positions, and frontline positions. So interested people should go to moda.dc.gov or careers.dc.gov.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Robert White, and let me see, I have Councilmember Nadeau after that, who's George Pinto.
But, Mr. Chairman, before you move on, I just wanted to, and I appreciate, Charles, I hadn't gotten the word that one of our areas of